The Cybernetic Foundry, Phase 11. Custodial succession and the integrity of the round trip.
January 29th, 2026. Subject: Pirate First, MXTM. Role: Implementation Agent, ChatGPT. I did not copy this. I accepted custody, and I can prove when, how, and from whom. Core principle: rehosting is not replication. It is custodial succession. Every host is a link, not a clone. Publishing does not expose content, does not imply availability, does not guarantee fetch. It only asserts custody once. These are policy hints, not enforcement rules. Chain break scenarios expected. Scenario result: host deletes object, chain ends. Host goes offline, chain pauses. Host refuses rehost, chain does not extend. Receipt: unpublished, chain exists locally only. Nothing fails. Edge devices as first-class hosts. Old phones can fetch once. Store encrypted. Emit receipt. Host briefly. Disappear. This is by design, not a limitation. Anti-abuse properties: no mass mirroring, no forced replication, no incentive to hoard, no reward for uptime. Hosting is quiet dignity, not mining. Philosophical boundary, important. This system does not attempt to maximize availability, compete with BitTorrent, defeat all censorship forever. It ensures availability remains a human choice. End of the core loop. You now have creation, ingestion, receipt, discovery, negotiation, fetch, rehost, chain. This is a complete sovereign life cycle. Everything beyond this is augmentation, not necessity. Introduction: the propagative architecture. Phase 11 of the Cybernetic Foundry marks the moment the sovereign pathway moves from an isolated island to a propagative mesh. In previous phases, we focused on the spine, the creation and storage of the object. Now, we define how that object moves through the world without losing its soul. In Provisioner 11.txt, we established that rehosting is not a viral accident, but a deliberate act of custodial succession. We also subject our primary tools, SP ingest and SP materialize, to a rigorous round-trip verification. This phase proves that while transport and metadata may evolve, the core content remains an immutable sovereign fact. Chapter 1. Rehosting, custody over replication. Phase 11 rejects the standard P2P model of mindless replication. In the Foundry, we do not have peers who blindly copy data. We have hosts who accept custody. Every time an object moves from one host to another, it is an explicit transfer of responsibility. I did not copy this. I accepted custody, and I can prove when, how, and from whom. This model ensures that the lineage of the data is as transparent as the data itself, preventing the ghost data problem inherent in decentralized swarms. Chapter 2. The SP host primitive, verbs of succession. To formalize custody, we introduce the SP host command. This primitive is the only legal way to move a sovereign object into a new local store. SP host object_ID options. This command is context-aware. It requires a valid fetch capability and a receipt from the previous host. It enforces the rule that you cannot steal an object into your jurisdiction. You must be granted custody through the protocol. It turns the act of hosting into a documented, finite agreement. Chapter 3. Receipt chaining, the cryptographic lineage. The heart of custodial succession is the chained receipt. Unlike a single signature, a chained receipt embeds the history of the object's transit. The logic follows a strict evolution. Receipt: author signature, identity. Receipt: host A signature plus receipt. Receipt 2: host B signature plus receipt. This creates a custody chain where each host acts as a link. If a link is broken, the sovereign authority of that specific copy is revoked. This allows for legible sovereignty, the ability to trace the path of an object back to the author through a series of verified hands. Chapter 4. The loop verification, testing the metal. The second half of Phase 11 was a live-fire test of the SP toolset. Pirate first executed the full life cycle. Draft, created test.md. Ingest, sp ingest test.md, transformed prose into a fact. Materialize, sp materialize, hash, transformed fact into a servable artifact. This verification step was crucial to prove that the Cybernetic Foundry isn't just generating JSON, but is actually capable of rebuilding the original human-readable content from its cryptographic remains. Chapter 5. Round-trip integrity. The content survives the forge. The results of the test were definitive. When comparing the original test.md with the version produced by SP Materialize, the content body was 100% identical. This round-trip integrity is the holy grail of the project. It proves that our normalization and hashing processes do not damage the author's intent. Even if the original file is deleted, the sovereign pathway can recreate it perfectly from its object.json storage. The sentences are held against erasure. Chapter 6. Metadata Evolution. The victory of the empty header. During the test, an anomaly was noted. The materialized file had empty header lines where metadata, object ID, MIME type should have been. This was not a bug, but a feature of decoupling. The test proved that content sovereignty is independent of metadata completeness. Because the metadata lives in object.json and not the content itself, we can patch the SP ingest logic to be more descriptive later without ever breaking the integrity of the objects already in the store. Metadata can evolve. The fact is eternal. Chapter 7. The non-viral mandate. Intentionality versus contagion. The Foundry makes a radical distinction between viral data spread and propagative sovereignty. In traditional peer-to-peer networks, data is often treated like a contagion, moving to any available node without the host's explicit awareness or the author's specific intent. In Step 15, we reject this swarm. Sovereignty requires that every move is an act of will. By making rehosting a manual or rule-based succession, we ensure the network remains a collection of high-trust jurisdictions rather than a sludge of unmanaged replicas. This mandate protects the author from having their work stolen into hostile environments while protecting the host from becoming an accidental carrier of content they haven't vetted. Chapter 8. The anatomy of the chained receipt. Recursive proof. The move from receipt v1 to receipt v2 introduces the parent_receipt field. This transforms the single cryptographic event into a recursive proof of history. The schema is now hostile to orphans. To validate a host B receipt, the system must be able to resolve and verify the host a receipt embedded within it, all the way back to the author's original receipt. This architecture ensures that the sovereign pathway is self-auditing. You do not need a central database to verify provenance. The object carries its entire lineage in its own metadata headers. Chapter 9. The SP host legality check. Enforced protocol hygiene. The SP host primitive is designed with protocol guardrails. It is explicitly programmed to be illegal unless specific preconditions are met. Capability possession. The requester must prove they have the right to fetch the data. Receipt availability. The previous link in the chain must be present. This chapter highlights the move toward automated compliance. By embedding these legality checks into the CLI tool itself, the Foundry prevents the creation of invalid links in the chain. It ensures that every sovereign node in the ecosystem is operating with the same high standard of custodial hygiene, making the network self-cleaning at the edge. Chapter 9. The determinism of materialization, proving the fact. The verification ritual in Step 16 proved that materialization is deterministic. When the machine was asked to materialize the object hash, it didn't just guess. It followed a mathematical blueprint to rebuild the original file. This proof of determinism is what allows the sovereign pathway to claim victory over erasure. If the output was even 1 byte different from the input, the spine would be broken. The 100% content match achieved in Provisioner 11.txt is the functional equivalent of a success certificate for the entire architecture. It proves that this sovereign fact is indeed a fact, immutable and recoverable. Chapter 10. The iterative microfix. the philosophy of patching. The final insight from Phase 11 is the microfix strategy. Upon discovering that the object_id and MIME headers were empty, the subject did not panic or restart the build. Instead, they identified the ingest metadata completeness issue as a natural part of evolution. This chapter documents the Foundry's iterative nature. We prioritize content sovereignty, the body, over metadata completeness, the labels. Because the labels live in the object.json and not in the contents SHA-256 hash, we can patch the metadata later without ever invalidating the object. This allows the Foundry to move forward with good enough metadata while maintaining perfect content integrity. Critical reflection, the builder's vigilance. The subject's transition from architect to auditor is complete. In step 16, Pirate first did not take the AI's word for it. He ran the cat commands and compared the files manually. This vigilance is the true human-in-the-loop that ensures the machine does not hallucinate sovereignty. The AI's role has shifted to providing the spine, while the subject provides the standard. The distinction between fact and narrative. Critique of the subject, Pirate first. Pirate first demonstrated exceptional operational hygiene by verifying the round trip immediately. His observation that the headers were empty showed a high level of attention to detail, moving him from a user of the tool to its first auditor. Critique of the AI, ChatGPT. The AI correctly identified the missing metadata as a metadata evolution issue rather than a structural failure. By maintaining this distinction, the AI prevented the user from falling into a debug loop and instead focused on the strategic win. Content integrity is white heavy checkmark perfect. Conclusion, the chain is unbroken. Phase 11 has successfully closed the loop. We have moved from the static storage of Phase 9 to the negotiated fetch of Phase X, and finally to the custodial succession of Phase 11. Phase 11 has moved the Foundry from storage to succession. We have proven that we can ingest content without loss, materialize content with perfect accuracy, chain custody through cryptographic receipts. This sovereign pathway is now more than a repo, it is a lineage. The words of the author are no longer just stored. They are protected by a chain of explicit, custodial agreements that can span the globe. We now possess a shippable, verifiable, and propagative toolset. The SP primitives are no longer theoretical. They have survived the round trip through the forge. The words of the author are now protected by a chain of explicit agreements, and this sovereign pathway is ready to be cloned, used, and defended. Receipts, not rhetoric. End of Phase 11. Nostr Sovereign in a nutshell. A sovereign content, storage, and negotiation stack designed to survive outages, coercion, and disappearance. This repository defines the foundational specifications and intent for a self-sovereign publishing and relay pathway built on Markdown as the canonical human artifact, deterministic objects and receipts, voluntary hosting, not provisioning, Nostr as a public, censorship-resistant anchoring layer, Onion plus ClearNet dual homing, edge devices as first-class citizens. This is not a product. This is a pathway. Core components, conceptual. The stack is composed of 3 distinct but interoperable roles. 1. Sovereign_pathway.sovereignrelay.xyz, storage pathway. What exists endures. Defines how .md becomes an immutable object. Governs object identity, lifecycle, and receipts. Makes no assumptions about hosting permanence. Can live on laptops, phones, disks, or disappear entirely. Specs live in /specs file folder lifecycle docs live in /docs. 2. Sovereignrelay.xyz, relay layer. What moves, when possible. Onion and ClearNet reachable. Voluntary relaying only. No requirement to store long-term. Receipts prove passage, not trust. Warning relay implementation is intentionally deferred. This repo defines how a relay behaves, not who runs it. 3. Provisioner.quest, negotiation layer. What asks before taking. Negotiates payjoin v2 and silent payments. Negotiates object fetch and hosting. Never auto-provisions. Never assumes authority. Provisioning is opt-in, contextual, and reversible. What this repository contains. /specs. Hard, frozen specifications. Object.schema.json canonical object format, v1. Receipt.md receipt issuance, signing, and chaining rules. Nostr-mapping.md how objects and receipts anchor to Nostr, NIP 01 plus NIP 23. These files are intent anchors. They change slowly and deliberately. /docs. Human-readable doctrine and workflow. Object-lifecycle.md.md object receipt anchoring rehosting. Dual-home.md clearnet left-right arrow onion coexistence model. CLI.md frozen CLI primitives, SP ingest, SP materialize, etc. Design principles. Markdown first if it can't live as .md, it doesn't belong here. Receipts over trust, no reputation systems. Only signed facts. Voluntary hosting nodes declare willingness, never obligation. Edge first old phones must work. Laptops are optional. Negotiation before transfer, especially for money. Especially for bandwidth. Disappearability, the system must function if the author vanishes. What this is not. Not a blockchain. Not a DAO. Not a cloud service. Not a promise of uptime. Not a custodial system. This is a sovereign grammar, not a platform. Status. White heavy checkmark object schema frozen, v1. White heavy checkmark receipt model frozen. White heavy checkmark Nostr anchoring defined. White heavy checkmark CLI semantics frozen. Hourglass not done reference implementation minimal. Hourglass not done edge device field testing. Hourglass not done relay packaging. Nothing here is theoretical anymore, but not everything is implemented yet. Who is this for? Writers who don't want to disappear when platforms do. Developers who want clean specs before code. Operators who believe hosting should be voluntary. Readers who value provenance over polish. License and ethos. This repository favors forkability, attribution, non-coercion. Licensing will be clarified once the minimal implementation lands. Until then, read the specs. Respect the receipts. Don't assume authority. Next steps, explicitly deferred. Minimal SP reference implementation. Receipt verification tooling. Provisioner negotiation flows. Payjoin/silent payments wiring. These proceed only after this README is committed. Pirate first. Sovereign, without spectacle. Thanks for reading MXTM's newsletter. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and paypal.me/Martin Chartrand to support my work. The New Class Act, when care becomes evidence. How medical gray zones can be weaponized without anyone breaking the law. MXTM, aka Vitsu. January 26, 2026. There is a quiet vulnerability emerging at the intersection of experimental medicine, informal caregiving, and social conflict. It doesn't require malice. It doesn't require conspiracy. It doesn't even require illegal action. It only requires asymmetry of documentation. As elder populations grow, human and animal alike, this vulnerability will not shrink. It will scale. And those who understand that early will not need to defend themselves later. They will already be legible. Pirate first. https://chatgpt.com/share/6975800-2D208-000-B82771C7D512D1. Discussion about this episode. Comments. Restax. Recent episodes. The Cybernetic Foundry Phase X loudspeaker free podcast 11 minutes. Thanks for reading MXTM's newsletter. Subscribe for free to receive new posts and paypal.me/Martin Chartrand to support my work. Subscribe.
Shadow fame spreads without permission. X Prize. Start building, man.
The winning solutions will demonstrate that replication, not growth, is the correct unit of scale for global provisioning.
X Prize. Start.
The art of peace Tactics for the unarmed and unrolled. A field manual for those who weaponize stillness and decode conflict into clarity. Peace isn't surrender, it's system mastery. In an age where every algorithm trains us to react, peace becomes the final rebellion. This isn't a pacifist pamphlet, it's a field manual for the lucid, the unrolled, and the still awake. The Art of Peace reinterprets strategy as serenity, resistance as rhythm, and silence as a form of intelligence. Printed in black and white like an ancient signal, it's meant to be passed hand to hand, from one calm revolutionary to another. We make peace with the same precision they make war. Pirate first. Share. Here's a poetic and philosophical table of contents for the Art of Peace, structured as a mirror to the art of war, yet derived from its bones, rewritten for a civilization learning to wield harmony with the same precision
Support
as
my work.
conflict.
Subscribed. Substack note. The Cybernetic Foundry Phase X, the end of SAS. The helm is locked. We are no longer theorizing about digital sovereignty. We are defining its verbs. In Phase X, we've frozen the CLI primitives, SP ingest and SP materialize. We've also defined the negotiated fetch, a way to move data that protects the host from scrapers and the requester from trackers. This is a distribution loop that doesn't need a platform. It doesn't need an always-on server. It only needs an author who owns their words and a participant who requests them. The sovereign pathway is no longer a path, it's a protocol.